Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The other day I put out a message on social media, mainly Facebook, to all the CF parents that wanted to ask my parents any questions at all. And very quickly I realised that quite a lot of people had questions for me individually, so I thought I'd separate it into basically 2 videos, maybe even 3 or 4 videos into questions. So today I thought I would answer your questions that you put out to me. Obviously my parents aren't here, so without further ado, I have got myself a nice big coffee to get me through these questions. So here we go. I don't know if I'll be able to finish this by the time I finish answering questions, but the first one, Emma Hughes: at what age did you become aware of CF and what it actually meant to have it? My son can now read his iPad and I'm conscious he might be able to read about CF. So this is where I'm really lucky, I think, in the kind of era that I grew up without sort of social media and too much information online, just, at the click of a button. And I can see why, there are so many worries for parents now where, I've got to be honest, some of the big charities in the UK and abroad post some quite negative stuff about the disease. So at the click of a button on Google, you've got the whole kind of conversation around life expectancy and all this nonsense. So I think, going back to the question, what age did I become aware of CF? I was aware of CF from a really, really young age. My dad was a trustee for the CF Trust and did a lot of fundraising, so I was sort of thrown into the limelight early on within the CF community. So I was aware of CF early on, but I think it wasn't until I was sort of, I'd say 8, 9, 10, around that kind of age group, where, I became aware through my parents of what CF meant. The great thing is that back then it was very different to how it is now, and I think it's a lot more of a positive community in a lot of ways. It's also, there's much more of a positive outlook. There's a lot of people that have done really well with cystic fibrosis, and I definitely sort of use those people on social media as sort of leaders of the community and as role models to these young kids growing up, because that's an amazing thing for them to have, because when I was a kid there were no role models, there was no one with CF to look up to really. But in terms of sort of just reading about it, I think it's really important to educate the children on, on the benefits, not the benefits of having CF, I see them as benefits, but certainly things around the positive stories about what can be achieved, as opposed to dwelling on, the worst case scenario. I think it's really important to dwell on, or to focus on the positive stories and what can be achieved. And I think, for me personally, I've got double delta F508 gene, the worst and I say the worst, obviously it's the most common and the most life-threatening gene, and it's impacted every part of my body, not just my lungs. So, if I can do it, then your kids can do it. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years, is if we can inspire these kids to grow up with a no limits attitude, then that's what it's all about really. So I hope that's kind of answered your question, but I do feel you on the whole. Your kids can jump on an iPad now and the iPod, do they even do iPods anymore? They can jump on an iPad now and literally the information is there, and sometimes without them even typing anything, with bloody adverts and God knows what that goes on social media these days. So yeah, it's just about, for me personally, about creating such a positive environment and educating your kids from a young age, but doing it in the right way, I would argue. So, the next question from Claire: were you always encouraged to be open about having CF as a child? Did you ever experience bullying in school because of it? So, first part of the question, was I always encouraged? Yes, as I said, my dad was a trustee. I was thrown in at the deep end from a really young age. I was practically, at the age of 2 or 3, like a poster boy for one of their campaigns where they raised a lot of money doing a cycle ride called the Easter Riders. So I was always pushed in front of people within the CF community, but also on fundraisers and stuff. So it's kind of second nature to me, which I appreciate. Not everyone is in the same position, but I was always I was open when I was in the CF environment. I was a closed book when it came to school and friends up until a certain age. Basically, I didn't want anyone knowing that I took tablets, so I developed ways of secretly being able to take my tablets without anyone seeing. I used to hide them a lot, and I just didn't want anyone to know that I was seen as, or I didn't want to be seen as different, because and back then, I would say bullying is rife in a lot of ways now, and I think the added pressure for kids now on social media, TikTok, and all of these channels, where all of these people make themselves so accessible, and the way I see social media now for kids, it's like when I was in school, you wanted to be the popular kid, and nowadays you can be the popular kid on social media outside your community. So it's really difficult for kids now. But I was encouraged to be open. I suppose the first time I really spoke openly about it to school friends and stuff was not long after I dropped the tablet on the floor in the dining room when we were having lunch in school one day. And my instant reaction when one of my mates said, "Oh, what's that?" I told them that it was cocaine. And everyone's seen an enzyme, I'm guessing, who were watching this. And it certainly looks nothing like cocaine, so I don't know what planet I was on. But I got into a lot of trouble for saying that, because he went back to his parents and they told the headmaster that Josh Llewellyn-Jones got cocaine, and I got into a bit of trouble, so I had to basically tell them the truth about what it was. So I was, again, thrown into the deep end, my own fault. But that conversation happened when I was about 12, I would guess, 12, 13. So from then on, my mates were just like, "Oh, well, it's fine, you take tablets to digest food, so what, who cares?" I think I'd also kind of back that up with the fact that I was fairly popular in school because I was good at football. I was captain of football, captain of cross country, and I was good at rugby. So I played in all the team sports, and I was pretty near the high level in athletics and stuff. So, and I think in general, the sportier kids tend to be, rightly or wrongly, slightly more popular and tend not to get bullied as much, I would say. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but that was my experience of it anyway. So I never got bullied during school, but again, it's a difficult one. And I think if your child is getting bullied in school, obviously there are ways of going about doing it properly, but I think it's just educating the child again to be able to hold their own, but also I think to understand there's a really good support network of people online, as in the CF community, the CF Warriors community that I've created a few years ago, and it's growing and growing and growing, where these kids can talk openly and get to know one another. They're all going through the same experiences, so that's definitely something I would recommend, pushing your children into. Next question, Leanne, how do you stay positive on the day CF feels really overwhelming? So again, with my family, I'm really lucky. They've always been super positive. I've got 2 older brothers and an older sister who basically battered me black and blue when I was growing up, which did me the world of good. But I've always been in a really positive, supportive environment. And I think naturally, when people look at CF, they think of the lungs, digestive system, and other organs, and muscles and bone density and all of these things. But what doesn't get talked about often enough, in my opinion, is the mental health side of cystic fibrosis. I would say, because the outlook is much better these days, it's probably becoming less and less of a mental health illness, I want to say, because the outlook is much better. But when I was growing up, with doctors and stuff, I was always told I probably wouldn't survive past 30 and stuff. So that's bound to have a really negative impact on your mindset. For me, I took it in my stride, but I know not everyone's the same. But even for me, as mentally strong as people think I am, and physically strong as people think I am, I often get days where I just think, I'm fed up of all of this. I don't want to do it anymore, and I'm fed up. And there are other reasons for my mental health struggles as well, but which I won't go into. But for me personally, I don't mind sharing with you, I suffer from post-event depression quite badly. So when I do a challenge, everyone's sort of on cloud nine for me, and everyone's buzzing around the event. And then it finishes on the Sunday, and everyone goes back to work on the Monday, and I'm sat there on my own thinking, well, what am I going to do now? So that's where I really suffer mentally. But I think mental health is really important to understand, and on those days, I'm mature enough to realise that there will be better days ahead, but that comes with maturity. So with children, when it's a little bit overwhelming for them and things, I think it's just being as supportive and as positive as possible. If you can look at it in the sense that you are doing it as a team, so you're all in it together, those days of being overwhelmed will become less and less because they can see that you're all in it together. So I think that would definitely help. Kaylee, what do you find the hardest about having CF? That's a really good question. It does actually make me kind of think long and hard about it, because I love having CF, and that is a really strange way of looking at things. But the way I look at it is that I wouldn't have achieved half as much as what I have without it. I wouldn't have had some incredible experiences. I wouldn't have met the amazing people that I have over the years without CF. People look at me and think, oh, you're so lucky to have your health and fitness. But what they don't realise behind the scenes is I've worked really hard, like super hard, training hours and hours a day to keep up my fitness levels. To train to be an athlete, you have to literally live and breathe what you do. Without putting a foot wrong. So your diet comes into play, your mindset comes into play. There's so many things you need to work really, really hard on. So I think the hardest part about having CF is when you take a day off, and we all do, you take a day off and then that becomes a habit. As in, that rolls into 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you've had a week off and you think, I haven't really done much this week. And I'm already starting to feel the effect of having that week off. So whilst I'm saying let your kids have a day off, don't let that roll into 2, 3, 4 days in a row where they don't really move much. I've done it, and weirdly after a challenge I'll always take time away from training, so intense, but I've got to be honest, it only goes about a week max before I think I've got to move, I've got to do something, whether that's a fast walk for an hour or whatever, just to get the air moving in my lungs. So yeah, I think that's the hardest part, is being able, you see all your friends and they can take a month off and it doesn't really impact them. Yeah, they lose a bit of strength, a bit of cardio endurance and what have you, but they can afford to take that much time off. And I think that's the hardest part, is you just got to keep on top of it. So I think that would be the hardest thing for me personally. Catherine, at what point did you actually think this is actually quite serious? I'm gonna have a swig. Okay, so as a 15-year-old, that was my I just turned 15. I'd gone back to school and we went on a boot camp with the school, and I got an infection, and that was the first time I'd ever had IVs. I was running cross country for Wales. I was competing at a really high level, so I was keeping on top of my health and fitness, and I was exercised really hard by my brothers growing up. But at 15, that was my first bout of IVs, and that experience of, I think it was about 10 days, 2 weeks in hospital in Cardiff, was pretty horrible, because it was all new to me at that age. And I think at that age I thought, oh, this is quite serious. I'd taken tablets, but I'd never really had to think about it too much because I was never ill. You'd find me as a toddler in a nappy in December running around with our chickens we had, and playing in the mud. And this is another thing. A lot of parents ask me these questions when I give talks around, well, I don't let my child play in the mud, or I don't let my child, jump in a lake, or I don't let my child play with chickens or certain animals and whatever. I did it all. I literally just did it all. Personally, and I know everyone's different and I've got to put that caveat in there, but personally, I think it really did wonders for my immune system, and I don't really mind the cold now. I'll go out in December in a t-shirt, doesn't bother me. You know, all of these things have just built up that, I think, that innate resilience, almost. And it worked for me. It might not work for others, but you know, I literally was just thrown at the deep end with everything. So whilst I knew at 15 that that was a serious time and the illness was serious, I still didn't let it hold me back, because I'd had such a great life before, and I could see that I had the potential to be a professional athlete. Even at that age, I was like, that's what I want to be. I want to be a sports person. You know, first thing I wanted to be was a footballer. But long story short, I wasn't good enough in the end. So I just went semi-pro, and that was it. But I think ultimately, for me, you can hype something up too much that then your mind focuses on that all the time. And that's why I say focus on the positives, focus on the potential, not, you know, the potential bad that can happen, but what you can achieve. And like I said, there's so many role models out there now with CF doing absolutely incredibly well. So hold them up in a good light and make sure that your kids are following them on social media. So yes, I hope that's answered the question. Natasha Ann, do you have any advice for a 12-year-old girl who's quite conserved and doesn't like to go places because of Creon, and she's drained mentally because of treatments and nebulizers? Okay, so this is where it does get tough, because obviously there's a lot to a 12-year-old. Obviously, Natasha, I don't know your daughter. And you know them better than anyone else ever will. But I think from my point of view, I always go back to the support network and a positive environment, and you know, and slowly approach, because I was thrown at the deep end really fast. It worked for me, and I think there was a bit of luck involved for my parents there, where it just worked and I loved it. Sometimes that doesn't work. But I think for your daughter, who's quite conserved, doesn't like to go places because of Creon, I completely understand that, because at that age, I didn't want anyone knowing about Creon. So what I used to do, I haven't got any Creon on me actually, I should have done, but what I used to do was, we had these little yellow and green containers, and they were an absolute arseache to open up and get your pills out without anyone seeing. So I used to put the pills I needed to take, so say I was on like 6 or 7 10,000 Creon for lunch. What I used to do was I used to take those out of the packet and put it in my pocket, and I used to sneakily get my drink in one hand, my tablets in another, so they were sort of like covered like this, and all I'd do is I'd just put them in my mouth like that, just slowly, and drink almost at the same time. Now, some of you may have seen the video of me taking tablets. I know kids can take just as many tablets as me with one tiny swig of water, and they're gone within a second, and sometimes you don't even realise they've done it. So I used to do that a lot. So there's different ways you could try that and see if she can do it, and just practice at home first, almost make it like a bit of a game so she's enjoying it. But in case that, you know, where she's drained mentally from the treatments and the nebulizers, I think that's where, I've got to be honest, the community on social media is amazing, where you see videos of these kids doing it from all over the world. And whilst we've got to be really careful with kids online right now, and we don't want to open them up to bullying and things like that, because there are some horrible people out there, I definitely think, like, reach out within the community. I mean, even if you put a post on the CF Warriors page on Facebook, you know, and you can reach out to other families and say, has anyone else got any other kids around that age, preferably girls, because obviously they relate more to another girl, she'll relate more to another girl, and just reach out, and I know that there'll be a couple of people that will be more than happy, sorry, that was the door going, will be more than happy to connect and have those sort of conversations. And I think if she's got that support network there, I think it'll just do her the world of good. So, last question for this video, because I'm going to split it up into different videos. Lee Hughes, at what point in your life did you think CF isn't going to win, and what was the turning point, if there was one? Okay, so I don't know if you can hear Woody barking outside. My father has got a really strong personality in terms of go get 'em kind of attitude, you know, a bit gung-ho, I would say slightly American in that sense, and that definitely stood me on good ground in terms of my mental attitude to just go and do whatever I want. Literally, I'm going to go, and if I want to attack that goal, I know I can do it, and I'm just going to go and get it. And that was instilled in me from a really young age. And I didn't think of CF growing up. I didn't think of it as winning and losing. I didn't think of CF as this thing that was going to stop me. Whilst I was always being told that potentially it will stop me, or I'm not allowed, I can't do certain things. That mainly came from doctors, consultants and physios. It never, ever, ever came from my family. And again, I think there are certain habits that some parents that I've spoken to have, which actually have long-term quite a negative impact on the kids growing up. If you physically stop your child from doing things because of CF, they will have a negative, it will have a negative impact on their mindset towards CF. Now, whilst I know that you want to keep your kids safe, obviously, you know, who wouldn't? But, you know, for me personally, things like jumping in a lake or going, you know, digging around a pond, or, you know, going round and jumping in the mud or muddy puddles and all of this stuff that a lot of people tend to be quite worried about lately, that I've noticed. You're physically stopping them from living their lives. You're physically stopping them from doing something that they really want to do. And whilst, yes, there's a risk to bugs being out there, there's literally risks to me walking out my front door every morning and walking the dog and crossing the road. You know, what with COVID and everything, we've all been super, super careful over the last, year and a half or whatever it's been now. I've lost track of time. And yeah, there are ways that we need to be careful. There are times where we need to be extra careful. But day-to-day life has to be as normal as possible for a CF child. And whilst I appreciate it's really hard for a parent to get out of that mindset of, you know, sort of protecting the child, wrapping them up a little bit and making sure they don't get these bugs and stuff. You know, I have, honestly, and I know everyone's different and I've got to caveat it all the time, which is a pain in the arse, to be honest, but, you know, I was thrown in the mud, I was playing in ponds, in lakes and farms, playing with chickens and cows and, yeah, you know, and sheep and all this stuff, right? I've never had a cold. Like, I've literally never had a cold. So I think it's one of those where, yes, you need to be aware of what CF is, but I've never played it in terms of I'm gonna, you know, CF is gonna win, or I've never had any doubt, and I've never really looked at it as like winning and losing. It's like I've just done whatever I've wanted to do in life. I've attacked everything with like 100 mile an hour and with all the strength I've possibly got. And I think in that sense, I don't think there's ever been a turning point in the answer to your last part of the question, because I was never in that mindset of winning and losing. I always just thought, it's life, I get on with it, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want regardless. So yeah, I'm hoping that answers your question. But guys, thanks so much for the questions. They were actually really nice to kind of read through and understand where you guys are coming from as well. I'm going to ask you to like, comment and subscribe, obviously. And if anyone's got any more questions, please leave a comment on this video. That's it from me. I'm going to finish my coffee and probably go and eat something because I'm really hungry.